Vaping is more popular than ever, with teen usage now skyrocketing. Mysterious lung diseases have popped up throughout the country, and MCPS sent 3 students to the hospital after vaping THC. Our community has questions, and coming up, MCM will try to answer them. We'll have a conversation with members of the community, experts, and local officials about our vaping crisis. Stay tuned. Good evening and welcome to MCM Connects, Our Vaping Crisis. I'm your host, Susan Kennedy. Tonight we'll share the latest news about the vaping health scare in our country and our community. Our focus is on the vaping trends for teens, as young people across the nation have fallen ill and even died after using vape devices and products. In just a few minutes, you'll hear Montgomery County's foremost thought leaders and policymakers discuss the vaping issue and what our county is doing about it. But first, here are the latest numbers on the harmful effects of vaping. To date, 6 people have died from diseases believed to be caused by vaping. 380 people across 36 states have been hospitalized with lung diseases related to vaping. Officials are swiftly responding to the situation, and the Trump administration recently moved to ban flavored e-cigarettes. Michigan has already imposed flavored e-cigarette bans, and New York is set to join. Closer to home today, the Montgomery County Council announced a bill that restricts how far vape stores can be from schools.
I was alarmed to hear of numerous cases in which high school students were leaving at lunchtime to purchase vaping products and then selling them to younger students in the afternoon. We know there are approximately 22 vape shops located in Montgomery County, and 19 of those 22 are located within a half mile of middle schools and high schools.
I'm fully supportive of this legislation. I will sign whatever comes over to me. If you want to make it a mile instead of a half mile, I'd sign that too.
This is the right thing to do. And I know that we're going to have a lot of businesses that may say, well, you're trying to put me out of business. No, I'm trying to save lives. I'm trying to make sure that our kids understand healthy decisions that are important to them. I want to make sure that the peers of my daughters can focus on what they need to.
In addition to discussing the social, legal, and medical issues surrounding vaping, we also spoke with the American Vaping Association, a group that advocates for the vaping industry. Here's what President Gregory Conley shared with us.
The illnesses and deaths happening across the country are very clearly linked to contaminated THC oil cartridges sold by drug dealers. You have health departments, Minnesota as well as Oregon, where there have been deaths, and where they have that information, they have come out and said contaminated THC oil cartridges are the cause. We were really disappointed in the Trump administration's announcement. Adults like flavors. Fruit and sweet flavors are the most used flavors among not just adults, but adults who have switched to vaping and benefited their health.
To get more in depth, we have a panel of experts, but before we introduce them, we're going to recognize some folks who are here in the audience with us tonight for this important program. First, Councilmember Gabe Albornoz, who is chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, and he's the lead sponsor for the vaping legislation, Zoning Text Amendment 1906 and Bill 2919. We have staff from Councilmember Craig Rice's office. He is also a co-sponsor of this vaping legislation. Representatives from the Tom Hucker office, the Will Jawando office. We have Dr. Raymond Crowell here from Health and Human Services, and Carla Silvestri from the Montgomery County Board of Education. And thanks to all of them for being with us here tonight for what I said was a very important issue to discuss. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists who are with us here tonight to get started with the discussion. Joining me now is Dr. Travis Gales, who is the Chief of Public Health Services at Montgomery County Health and Human Services, Shelley Bresler of Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, and John Schachter, Director of the State Communications at Tobacco Free Kids. What a great group we have with us tonight, and this is a huge problem. We were discussing a little bit before we got out here tonight some of the statistics that are coming out and what's happening. Dr. Gales, I'm going to start with you. What is the county's role when it comes to this issue in protecting adolescent health?
Sure. I think first and foremost, our big responsibility is making sure the public is aware of the necessary and relevant data and statistics so that they understand the risk associated with any behavior, particularly as it focuses on vaping. We also have a responsibility to make sure that we look at the full aspects of all of the issues of the problem so that we make sure that we provide services and interventions that address all different areas, because ultimately our goal isn't just to only get one aspect of a problem, but to make sure that we treat the full complement of symptoms of the disease.
Shelley Bresler, you are a member of Parents Against Vaping, is that correct? Tell us
Correct,
a little
yeah.
bit about that organization and how it formed.
It started about a year ago. 3 moms up in New York, their kids came home, 10th grade, and said, we had a program at school about vaping, and about somebody came in to tell us vaping is not for children, but there's nothing wrong with it. And they dug down and realized that Juul was paying for these community education services that they were misrepresenting as public health seminars, and they were really just there saying kids shouldn't vape, but it's okay when you're older. And these moms went crazy and started a campaign to raise public awareness and also work with state, local, and federal legislators to try to change laws. There were no laws on the books regarding this, and to get in front of the FDA and talk about these issues and say this is a public health crisis. This is not just something that's faddish. This is just something that we need to address.
John Schachter, before the show we were talking a little bit about statistics, and I think in 1 year the number of kids who have started vaping has risen 78%. Is that correct?
Well, last year the number rose 78% to over 20% of high school students using e-cigarettes. New numbers just came out the end of last week. That number is up to 27.5% of high school students. So it's a 135% increase in the last 2 years. That means 5 million high school and middle school students are using e-cigarettes now. It's a youth e-cigarette epidemic. It's something that we have to tackle and have to tackle now. And driving it are these flavored products. There are over 15,000 different flavors of e-cigarettes. It's mind-boggling. Flavors like gummy bear, cotton candy, mango, mint, creme, fruit. There is no reason for these products to be on the market. They're luring in kids. These kids are being hooked with massive doses of nicotine, and it's driving this crisis that we have to tackle now.
I think a lot of people don't know that 1 Juul pod is equal to a pack of cigarettes. Is that correct? And how quickly do these kids go through these pods? Do we have any idea?
I think it's highly variable. Some kids can go through a pod a day, others take a little bit longer. But I think it's important to understand why we're concerned about vaping, not only in the sense of looking at the acute issue with respiratory illness, but early nicotine exposure can be detrimental to the development of the adolescent and young adult brain. The adolescent and young adult brain, even though we treat kids as young adults as early as 16 to 18, given the privileges that they have, their brain is still developing up until the early 20s, early to mid 20s. And the particular area that nicotine has a detrimental impact on is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is essential for executive functioning. It's essential for doing a lot of the adulting things that make us adults in terms of making those decisions and balancing what's appropriate and inappropriate in terms of actions. And so early exposure to the nicotine, even in small amounts, can impair the development of that area. It can also increase a young person's addiction to the substance, increase the initiation to other substances that may be more harmful, as well as increase their withdrawal symptoms should they stop using it.
And what about this legislation that the county is putting forward to put a distance on how far away these shops can be? What kind of a difference do we see that being able to make for us? Anybody here think that that's going to be enough, or is it a good first step?
It's definitely a good first step, but it's just a first step. If it's limited to just vaping shops, they're not a ton. And there are probably not a ton that are within a half mile of schools. But there's a convenience store, a 7-Eleven, a neighborhood little gas station that's selling these products that may be across the street from the school or a half a block from the school, that the kids can go out at lunch and buy these products.
I think the legislation will affect 19 different shops. Well, there's 19 shops right now who fall within that distance from a school, so it is going to make somewhat of an impact. But what is the thing that has to happen to get these kids educated about this? I know we talk about curriculum in the schools, we talk about parents getting more involved and understanding what's going on with this. This is a crisis, this is an epidemic. What needs to happen to make that 78% go down to 0?
Well, one thing we know is that a lot of kids don't realize that these e-cigarettes, and I call them e-cigarettes, not vaping, because vape implies water vapor, harmless water vapor, and that's what a lot of kids think they're using. But these are tobacco-based products. That's where the nicotine comes from. So these e-cigarettes are harmful, they're dangerous, as was pointed out, with the addictive qualities that affect the adolescent brain. So kids need to learn that. A lot of them don't realize that, and parents don't realize it. And teach these kids and teach the parents what these products look like, how to look for signs and symptoms that kids are on it. But again, a lot of it comes back. It's great to see getting these products away from the schools is a great first step. It's a limit to what the county is able to do under state law. So we'd love to see the state of Maryland ban the flavored tobacco products, flavored e-cigarettes, flavored cigars, menthol cigarettes, all flavored tobacco products. No exceptions. Let's take that next step at the state level, because that's what's going to help bring these numbers down and help end this crisis.
Yeah, Shelley,
and not only that, with the children, when the original surveys were put out years ago, they would say, how many people are using e-cigarettes? And the students said no, they're not using them. But then when the question was asked, how many kids are juuling? The numbers went substantially up. The students themselves did not realize they were one and the same.
And I know now these kids are doing it in the bathroom at school. They're calling it the Juul room, not the bathroom. So Juul is really kind of the impetus behind this huge surge in e-cigarette usage. Is that true?
Yeah, Juul's been driving is the single biggest cause of the youth e-cigarette epidemic, and it's interesting because you see them running ads in the newspaper, the Washington Post, saying, we support keeping these products away from kids, and we're the good guys, and we want to remind people they're not. They're the people they're the company that caused the youth e-cigarette crisis. They're fighting tooth and nail against these flavor bans because that's what they know it's going to impact them, because it's going to keep these products away from kids. And they're 70% of the market right now. Their early social media was aimed at young people. We've seen that. Their emphasis and efforts in schools it's despicable what they've done. So we need to go attack the heart of the problem, and a large part of that is Juul.
And another issue that people don't realize, a major stakeholder in Juul is Philip Morris Altria. So once they started to lose the market share, they needed to find a place to regain.
Juul is big tobacco 2.0. That's
Yeah,
one of the things we
yeah,
talk about,
that's right.
and people shouldn't forget that.
Dr. Gales, talk a little bit about maybe what the factors are that are driving these kids to use e-cigarettes. It's a form of mind-altering. It's a mind-altering substance. You can become addicted very easily through the nicotine. Kids are putting THC in the oil, and I even read about a woman who was putting methamphetamines in there as well. People are finding ways to get other drugs in this. What's driving this usage?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors, and I think it's important to acknowledge the council in taking an affirmative step in terms of addressing this. That creates the opportunity to have deeper conversations to address the issue that you mentioned, because one of the larger factors that's driving this is a hidden epidemic of substance use within the county. The need for increased behavioral health and mental health services for all of the population, but particularly as it focuses on young people, to make sure that they have access to services to help teach them how to cope, help teach them about the dangers of different substances, whether it's vaping, THC, meth, whatever you describe. I think that's a forgotten piece of the conversation that needs attention. And the hope is that as we put resources in this area to curb this aspect of behavior, we also have some serious conversations about the needed resources for both outpatient and inpatient services to be able to help individuals deal with the full spectrum of their symptoms and deal with the underlying disease that could be driving it. Certainly another aspect of it is the advertising and marketing components of that. Part of addressing that issue in terms of education is making sure that we use language, we speak like adolescents and young adults in terms of coming up with programs and interventions that speak their language and speak to them in a way that resonates and will address their behavior.
That's a very good point. And I know, Shelley, your group that you lobby at a national level. Is that correct?
We advocate.
You advocate at a national
level?
Well,
at state, federal levels, both. But one of the things that's going to happen this week is there's going to be an announcement of a bicameral, bipartisan caucus on the House and the Senate of members who want to stand up to this problem.
And Dr. Gales is talking about more of a holistic approach to this. And I think that's really important to helping the kids who are already addicted. I mean, your group is working to, get rid of all these people who are out there selling these things to kids. But really, it's become a problem when we have to deal with the repercussions of that.
Well, that's right. And we're going to see a lot of kids that are going to need to go into some type of addiction programs, whether they're outpatient. And for the kids that are truly, truly addicted, some of them will need to go inpatient. And whether or not there are facilities available for these kids who were so highly addicted to the nicotine. Some of these kids are vaping 2 and 3 pods a day. It's the equivalent of smoking 3 packs of cigarettes for the nicotine level and whatever long-term health effects may be in their lungs from bringing in a foreign substance.
And do you think that those flavors that we're working on getting rid of, that's the reason why they're doing so much of it? They don't realize that what they're doing is really getting themselves addicted.
Yeah, and the flavors mask the harshness of the taste. So with cigarettes, it's a lot harder to smoke as many cigarettes, unless you're talking menthol, which helps ease it. So with e-cigarettes, with these flavors, it masks that harshness, makes it easier to ingest so much more nicotine and becoming so much more addictive. And as Dr. Gales pointed out, you see this addictive behavior, and it affects your likelihood of being addicted to other products and using other products, including regular cigarettes. We see it 4 times more likely now to try and use regular cigarettes, and tobacco is still the leading cause of preventable death and disease in the country, so we can't forget about the tobacco use as well. And if e-cigarettes lead to that, another reason to tackle this problem hard and fast.
So what about the argument, Dr. Gales, that these help people quit smoking, like the gentleman said in the video, that he doesn't smoke anymore and he feels better by using e-cigarettes?
Well, any intervention, you have success stories, and I don't think we don't have to stop exploring healthy alternatives to smoking behavior when we know that this is disproportionately impacting young folks, including exposing them to nicotine at early ages, disproportionately marketing substances to them that are illicit for them. Let's not forget, in 2 weeks you can't buy these products under the age of 21. And then even in the acute setting where we have been able to demonstrate an activity in some way is tied to respiratory illnesses. And contrary to what was stated in the video, we have not been able to prove a causal relationship between whether it's the act of vaping, the substance that was vaped, where the person bought it, in terms of linking that to the onset and development of respiratory illness. But from a public health perspective, we know that the activity is related to illness, and our job is to make sure that people are aware of all of the risks and the dangers, and to try to prevent the further spread of disease and illness as best as we can.
Okay, I think we're about ready to go to our audience for questions. So I have Mr. Albornoz is going to the microphone, so please give us your name. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Councilmember Gabe Albornoz, representing the entire county. I can't thank all of you enough for your work. I've learned a tremendous amount about this issue for the last year and was very alarmed when I first met with Dr. Gales and he presented to a committee what was happening in the county. Just a quick point of clarification, there are 2 bills. One bill would eliminate vape shops from being within a half-mile of schools, but the second bill would eliminate the ability for manufacturers to sell to any retailer within a half a mile of schools. So the hope is that we increase stop the flow and make it a little bit more difficult to access. One of the things that we know that worked well in the tobacco fight was when youth started, instead of pressuring the other youth to smoke, they started pressuring them to not smoke. And I think that's where a shift needs to happen with regards to vaping. We've heard from youth regarding this issue, and so we have to do a full court press on that public information campaign. But for anybody on the panel, if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, how best to incorporate youth into this discussion so that they can feel part of the solution. Thank you.
It's a great point.
Well, actually, we don't have all the details, but we are working on an initiative partnering with one of our partners with our population health-based program, Healthy Montgomery, to have a competition that is led by students, to give them the opportunity to create public service announcements around there. It's going to be a competition, but it is students speaking their language, using their own lingo, using their own music, because as the older I get, I don't speak fluent teenager anymore. And so you're right, it's important to make sure that they are included in that process, because we don't always know what's important to them and what will resonate and stick with them. And so you're right. So we're hoping to introduce that within the span of a couple of weeks, and certainly not just as it relates to vaping, but looking at other opportunities to include adolescents in our healthy, our population-based health approaches to make sure that we're hearing their language, speaking their language, and including them in the process.
And we have a number of youth advocates in our ranks as well, of people that have become addicted and what they've gone through to get off it. And some have been bullied. It was a lot of peer pressure is how they started it. And they're sending the message back saying, this isn't harmless. This will affect your life. And it is addictive. So people telling firsthand stories, but we've got to get the word out through the schools and through public awareness campaigns, and maybe get some celebrities to stand up and say, this is not cool. Unfortunately, there are a lot of celebrities out here who will put on their Instagram, who will put on their Snapchat and things like that, them at Juul parties, which we are hopeful that that tide will turn.
And we've seen, as Shelley mentioned, a lot of these kids, PAVE kids who have been great in getting that message out. There's a new website we have with the new project with our partners, including PAVE, fightflavoredecigs.org, and it has some of these stories, some of these videos and stories that these kids are telling, and they do have a strong message of those who, one young woman who's active with tobacco-free kids who started on Captain Crunch flavored e-cigarettes because that was her favorite cereal, and she talks about getting addicted before she realized what was happening, and she's gotten off of that, and now she's a great advocate for us. So it is great to get those youth messages out. You're right, that's what kids listen to, that's what kids hear first and foremost, so we're trying to share those messages. And
another thing we have on our website, parentsagainst.vaping.org, has a toolkit that's front and center. Is go back to school, not to Juul, is sort of our tagline right now, but on there has resources, has links, and has ways for both parents to talk to their kids, and also what to look for when they see changes in behavior, when they see these funny little pens. The problem is a lot of the devices look like everyday objects. They look like pens, they look like flash drives. And for a parent not, seeing in a backpack that these things are there, may not even realize exactly what they are. So through this toolkit that's available online, and we hope that people will actually use the materials in there, a lot of this information is readily available, so parents can ask those questions. They're not easy conversations to have. I have 2 teenagers. I know that there are other things that they would rather talk, well, they don't really want to talk to us anyway. How was your day? Fine. But these are hard conversations to have. But when parents notice complete changes in their child's personality, there's something going on there. Could be vaping, could be depression, could be a combination of it all, could be uses of drugs. So these are things that parents need also to know what they're looking for.
I don't see anybody at the microphone, but I have a question. Internet sales, that's a problem. And this isn't a regulated industry, and kids can buy these things off of eBay. This is a $9 billion a year business. That's another issue that needs to be tackled. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and how that fits into the picture.
Yeah, we've been pushing for legislation both at the federal level and again, especially to end internet sales. That's an important part in working with the Food and Drug Administration, urging FDA to have that be a part of it also, getting rid of the flavors, but also ending internet sales of these flavored e-cigarettes, because as you said, it's too easy to access them that way, and getting them out of the stores is step one, but it's not the full solution. So yeah, it's a key to go at that market right now.
Are they receptive to what you're bringing to the table? The FDA and...
Yeah, I mean, you saw the announcement out of the administration last week that they're planning to do some type of crackdown on flavored e-cigarettes, but we don't know how comprehensive it'll be, how certain it'll be, how immediate it'll be, so we want to keep our foot to the metal and on the accelerator and keep pushing, and that's why we're not stopping the efforts until we're done at the state and local level, because one thing we know is the industry, Big Tobacco and Juul and all these others are not, they're going to fight to delay it, to weaken it, and to tie it up in court. So we want to attack it from all areas, but the FDA has been receptive right now, states and localities are receptive, so we're going to keep pushing.
And another thing, that's why we're not going to rely strictly on an executive order to do this, because it could be delayed, it could get tied up in court. There are ways that they will, the opponents will manipulate the language and tie it up in courts. So that's why we want states and local entities to pass their own legislation. And this would be the floor. I mean, you can go as high as you want to mandate certain aspects, including the sale of it, and to ensure that your locality has strong flavor bans that include everything.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're about out of time here. With this particular panel, I'm going to ask each one of you for some takeaways that you have before we sign off to our next panel. Dr. Gales?
Well, really briefly, I have two things. One, to add on to the question about internet sales, is the big concern is what kids are getting access to in terms of what actually the content of the liquids and substances that they're using. And it's concerning because we did see episodes in the county where students were losing consciousness, which should not happen if you're vaping nicotine. So we don't know what's in those substances, and that's a heightened area of concern. And I think the second component is, I really hope in this discussion about vaping is that we really do invest in a larger conversation about behavioral health and mental health needs of our adolescents and young adults. We have to take a serious step in terms of increasing access to services, acknowledging and recognizing the stressors that they go with, and helping them figure out strategies to cope. And so that's just the take home that I hope is a continued part of the conversation around this issue.
Shelley?
The main thing to take away that this isn't a political issue. This is a public health emergency. It's not Republican, it's not Democrat. It's just a question of saving this generation from becoming nicotine addicts.
John?
One thing we've seen in all the stories we've heard and all the evidence of these cases of lung illness and everything, we don't know a lot. These products aren't sufficiently regulated, and kids should not be guinea pigs in the e-cigarette experiment. So let's crack down, let's get the FDA to do its job, let's get states and localities to get these flavors off the market and bring these numbers down and solve this crisis once and for all.
Excellent. I want to thank our panel for being here, sharing your insights on this important topic. MCM reporter Jordan Lindsay had a chance to explore the issue of vaping with folks in our community. Here's what she found.
Health officials say one nicotine vape cartridge is equal to about 20 cigarettes. While the CDC continues their investigation into this growing trend, they are urging people to not use e-cigarette products. 21-year-old Kellen Leeson of Vapor Worldwide explains how easy it is for teens to get their hands on these products.
I could walk not even 5 minutes, 2 minutes across from my high school to buy these vape, Juul and tobacco products. These gas stations that are selling tobacco products, or convenience stores or markets, or maybe a vape shop, some of them are very, very close to schools. And, if you can walk there during your lunch period, I just think that's opening the door for underage sales, for people buying them that shouldn't be buying them.
Cardiovascular surgeon Dr. Philip Corcoran at Suburban Hospital says he's seen several patients locally.
We've seen a number of different things. One of the things we've seen in some of our high school athletes is the development of a persistent dry cough. And I've evaluated a number of patients for that. And when a patient is coughing and can't control the cough, that's something we're concerned about. And we're seeing an increased incidence of individuals who have this dry cough, who are otherwise young and healthy and physically fit and athletic, say high school or college athletes. And the common theme that we're seeing is that they're all using the vaping pens.
Thank you, Jordan. And coming up after the break, Dr. Corcoran will be right here joining us on the panel. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anita Chandra with today's tip for kids from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Did you know e-cigarettes can be just as addictive as regular cigarettes? This is especially true for teenagers whose brains are still developing. Parents should learn the names for e-cigarettes and what they look like. Talk to your teen about the dangers of nicotine. Often, teens who start with e-cigarettes take up other forms of tobacco. For more information, visit healthychildren.org and talk with your pediatrician.
Some say e-cigarettes aren't dangerous,
But science shows nicotine can harm teens' developing brains.
no matter how they're exposed.
Let's do an experiment to find out.
Here's a teen who won't be using e-cigarettes.
Now we need one willing to risk their brain development.
Anyone care to volunteer your kid?
Anyone?
Your kids are not an experiment. Protect them from e-cigarettes.
Welcome back to MCM Connects Our Vaping Crisis. We've been exploring the issue of vaping in our community and beyond. While there's no scientific evidence to support claims that vaping is a safer alternative to cigarettes, there are those who believe it is. James Monsees, co-founder of Juul Labs, recently testified to Congress, and MCM spoke with a vape store owner in Gaithersburg who believes e-cigarettes helped him quit smoking.
Public health authorities such as Public Health England have concluded that vaping is a fraction of the risk of smoking, at least 95% harmful, less harmful, and of negligible risk to bystanders.
We started about 5 years ago here in this location, based solely on my own personal growth and quitting cigarettes. But that wasn't working for me health-wise for obvious reasons we all know about, science. And I started vaping instead, lost weight. I exercise now 3 times a week. I couldn't even walk up 10 flights of stairs when I was a smoker. So health-wise, lifestyle, everything's better.
We're now joined by our second panel of experts to provide perspective. Joining us, we have Dr. Philip Corcoran, a surgeon at Johns Hopkins Community Physicians. Dr. Cara Grant, supervisor PK through 12 health and physical education at Montgomery County Public Schools, and Captain Didone from Montgomery County Police. Thank you all for being here tonight to talk about this really important issue. Dr. Corcoran, let me start with you. We listened to you talk about this dry cough that a lot of the young people you see have. Can you describe for us what is happening when these kids are vaping and getting sick? What is happening to the lungs?
Susan, we're very concerned that, as was mentioned in the previous panel, the myriad of the aromas and the flavors take away some of the disinhibition for the vaping activity. And we know from studies that a very good way to deliver medicine throughout the entire lungs is to go ahead and blast air into a liquid and then nebulize that and have a patient inhale that. And that sounds an awful lot like the vaping that's going on right now. So it's a very effective way of delivering the vaporized elements of these emollients and the oils that are in there to the lungs.
And the condensation, is that getting in there to cause these illnesses?
Yeah, well, we think that the dry cough is as a result of direct irritation, much the way that we have with smoke inhalation.
Okay. Dr. Grant, talk a little bit about what challenges has MCPS been up against with this epidemic taking off like it is, and what's the role of the schools in all of this?
The number one role of schools is to make sure students are safe and available for learning. And as a result of that, the focus of school safety includes physical health and wellness of our students. And that's directly linked to the Be Well 365 initiative that we have right now. Physical health and wellness is one of the essentials. With that being said, it's a comprehensive model where we have student rights and responsibilities, where we have students available to receive health education starting as early as elementary school to learn about the harmful effects of tobacco. That's engaging with parents and community to make sure that not only are teachers aware that these USB ports are jewels, they're not educational devices, that we're providing education to our whole community. Is of vital importance. So it's a multi-pronged approach with health education being comprehensive through elementary, middle, and high school, making sure parents are informed so that they know what their students are being taught so that they can be aware and look for those as well, and making sure community is as well aware. When we have education, it brings awareness, and when we have awareness, it brings a sense of urgency, and that helps the community take action like the first panel group had.
Tom, Dr. Grant said this is a multi-prong approach, but this has got to be a multi-prong problem for the police department. Talk a little bit about how this has affected your work.
Well, we've been working for years to try to limit the access to tobacco for youth. And we've been making great progress. I think smoking was going down, as we talked about in the green room before here. But this has really turned the tide in the opposite direction. You know, they've changed the laws effective October 1st. It'll be illegal for people to be sold this at age 21, but they have changed it so the possession is no longer a factor. So after the youth get these illegal products, there's no real regulation. So it always starts off as like a gateway, is looking at the e-cigs, but don't be fooled that THC is being then inserted. They can buy these pods, they manufacture the pods, and they're putting the chemicals into these vape pens that can be very concealing and discreet, but nonetheless they're vaporizing THC. And we talked about, for a lot of people, when you think about marijuana, that's about 13%. Even the new hyperponic is like 20-25%. But when you start vaping waxes at 70% THC, and liquids at 80%, and now crystals at 90% THC. So we're not talking about marijuana. We're talking a very dangerous chemical that has an immediate impact. So this has a huge impact. So it's not just e-cigs, it's kind of the gateway to other drugs.
Yeah. Dr. Corcoran, I know we talked about the pods that have the THC in them, but I know because of the lack of the FDA regulations, sometimes there are other things in these pods that can cause illness, like the vitamin E acetate. Can you explain that and talk a little bit about that and how we're finding that becoming an issue?
So what has been reported nationwide was that there have been a large number of individuals who have been really seriously ill and hospitalized, over 355 or so nationwide, with a respiratory type of illness, and many of them have been described as a lipoid pneumonia. Lipoid pneumonia is an entity. It's not really an infectious pneumonia the way you and I understand pneumonia to be. It's actually an installation of oil-based emollients that get deep inside the lung tissue and then cause an intense inflammatory reaction in the lungs, making individuals really very, very critically ill.
Yeah, I mean, some people have been in comas, and they have this phenomenon, or it's called popcorn lung. Is that what we're describing here?
Yes, that's exactly right. So popcorn lung is a term that's used to describe the appearance of the chest X-ray or the appearance of the CAT scan, which would look literally like multiple kernels of popcorn have been placed in multiple areas in the lungs.
Does this have anything to do with the age of the people who are using the products? Does it affect the younger people more so than people who, say, are our age here?
It's hard to know. We know that at least 2 of the 6 described deaths have been over the age of 60. And all 6 have been inveterate vapors, as has been described. But we know that many of the 355 or so who have been hospitalized really critically ill, and some on the ventilator and some even on respiratory support, artificial lungs and such, have been in their late teens, early and mid-20s, which is the direct target area of individuals who have been targeted by the vaping and the juuling industry.
Dr. Grant, as mentioned, there were a couple incidences in Montgomery County Public Schools last year where kids had seizures or went unconscious after vaping. Talk a little bit about how the school reacted to that. What did they do, and how did they respond as far as taking care of the kids, notifying the parents? Talk a little bit about what went into all of that.
So with that, with those incidents, the security team went into full effect, and as a result of that, there is an internal campaign to also share additional information with community members to make sure that parents and community are aware of what's happening so that this issue is not replicated, and that our students are safe and that they're not taking these unhealthy risks. Mm-hmm. We know that our students are going to take risks. That's part of adolescence. Mm-hmm. What we want to do is steer them towards healthy risks, and like I've shared before, healthy risks include trying out for a sports team, joining a club, sitting with someone at the cafeteria that's alone or being doesn't have a friend group yet, taking those healthy risks, going down to the new rec center at Wheaton or the library. Those are all the healthy risks. What we do know is that they are making unhealthy risks with vaping and substance abuse. So what we've done in Montgomery County also is shifting our curriculum focus. Instead of a content-based model, we're shifting to a skills-based model. What does this mean? It means that over time, our students aren't getting static content. With technology and access, they're getting more and more information. So we need to teach them and equip them with the skills they need to be successful adults, with decision-making, with goal setting, with communication skills, with advocating for health. All of these incorporated should be able to transfer so that they can refuse tobacco, they can refuse the vaping, they can say no, they can walk away from an uncomfortable situation, they can help a peer advocate and access community resources for when and if they need to quit something or walk away from a negative situation. So it's ongoing communication with the community regarding what happened, how we can support, providing parent information, enhancing our curriculum, as well as working with partner agencies like Health and Human Services.
A little bit like what Councilmember Albornoz talked about as far as putting that peer pressure on that this is not a cool thing to do, and that's something that possibly could work to our benefit with this. Captain Didone, obviously this is an issue that's going to affect your department. We have a new law going into effect October 1st where the age will go up to 21 now. For these young people who decide they want to buy these products. How do you work with enforcement and talk about the difficulty when we are dealing with THC and other illegal drugs that these kids are using in these Juuls or e-cigarettes?
Well, when we come to the THC, that is a crime in itself. That's still regulated and still illegal. I think one of the important things is working with the council. I mean, we're blessed in Montgomery County. We have a responsible council who will take the initiative, will take the tough task, and work out there to protect our kids and protect our community. Whether there's traffic laws or laws in this nature, they're always willing to step up. What we want to do is now we're going to switch our focus to the distribution of these products, which makes good sense. When we want to look to still bring back some sanctions against the youth, but we want to, as Dr. Gale said, we want to work them into the treatment phase. We're not looking to punish any of the youth, but we are going to be looking to punish the people that are selling these products. Whether it's through the state law or through the county code law, we'll work with our ABS, who is our partner in this, to look to do enforcement, to do compliance check operations. We bring the youth and get them involved, and they go in and try to purchase, and if they sell, there'll be sanctions. And in some laws, there's a first offense of $300, the second offense is $1,000 if it's within 24 months, and the third offense will be $3,000. And they can get their access, their vaping license, basically removed if they continue to sell. So we'll work with them on the state level, we'll be working with the council on the county level to really take this new legislation and craft it to what we need so it's practical and it makes sense. The overall goal is awareness, education. We don't want to be using enforcement to be the lead in this. We want to be the trail in, to help reinforce education, to help reinforce public policy. We want to be there in the back lines to try to move the people that don't want to move, and then to stop those businesses that are illegally providing this out there once the legislation goes into effect.
Dr. Corcoran, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing and how you feel about this as a doctor. Is this very scary to you to witness what's going on with this and how quickly this has become a problem?
It's the technology has come onto the scene for our patients very, very rapidly. Over the last few years, it's just been an explosive experience. And we heard from other experts on the panel that statistics suggest that up to 27.7% of our high school students are routinely using this technology. If we go onto the college or university campuses, it's much higher than that. And we speak to any individuals who are on a college campus, we notice it's almost this type of activity at gatherings, in class, it's almost pervasive. So we're very, very concerned about it. And we're very concerned about the fact that marketing technology and techniques have been aimed at our youth. And there's a general perception, which I believe is a misperception, that this technology is absolutely risk-free, and we know it's not. We simply know it's not. We know that with any kind of inhaled vaporized product, there are microparticulate matter. There's microparticulate matter that gets deep inside the lungs. And we know that that gets systemically absorbed into the lungs, and that constitutes an awful lot of the risk for cardiovascular and for pulmonary disease down the road.
These flavored bans that we're doing in Michigan and New York, and I believe San Francisco also has it. Is that a good enough deterrent, do we think? Is that a deterrent? I think we'd have to get rid of all of it, not just the flavors, but maybe menthol as well.
I think that's an excellent first step because, as was mentioned before, a lot of the disinhibition to go ahead and take a huge breath in is sort of obviated by the presence of the aroma or the vapor that makes it smell or taste much, much more palatable. So that actually is allowing the delivery of the vaporized products deep into the lungs.
Okay, well again, now we're going to turn to our audience for questions, and I don't know if we have anybody who would like to step up and address our panel. If you'd introduce yourself and ask away. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carla Silvestri on the school board for Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you so much for this information. I think I'm a parent as well, and we are in the dark about all this because it's come so quickly, and so this is very important that we get this information out. But I had two questions. One is parents, we've grown up with cigarette smoking. It's been around for generations, and marijuana as well. So sometimes that is a red flag if you smell cigarettes in particular or marijuana kind of have a very strong aroma, and we've kind of been trained to catch it. Is that the same for e-cigarettes? Will all these fruity flavors, will they stay around and you'll be able to say, why are they so fruity today?
No, I'm shaking my head because that's what we're doing a lot in the police department. We're trying to promote the awareness. That's it's a discreet sense. It has a fruit smell. It doesn't have the typical odors that we've grown up with and are associated. And that's why it's easy for the children to get away with it. And they make these pens, as I said, in flash drives and regular pens, so they're deceptive by nature. So, when people see this, or we come out with Jamie Derbyshire, who's our lead in the police department, she comes out with her show and tell kit. And people say that and they go, oh my, I've seen this, I've seen that. And they didn't know what it was. It's just making that association. So that's where we're working collectively with the schools, HOAs, and other community groups to bring this awareness in. It's great having the medical panels on here, so it's just, you can't debunk the myth. You can tell them it's not healthy. Common sense tells us inhaling stuff in your lungs that's not meant to be inhaled is unhealthy. It's not safe. But now we're going to try to give the parents the tools and the advocates. It's just reaching the parents. We always get the same 20 good parents to come to every meeting, but I think all the parents need to know what's out there so they can make informed decisions on taking, caring, and raising their children.
Thank you.
There's a statistic out there that I just learned recently that 5,700 kids start vaping every day. That's staggering when you think about it. What comes to mind when you hear a statistic like that? It's almost worse than an epidemic. It's a full crisis.
There's no doubt that this is becoming, if not already is, absolutely a public health crisis that we're facing with our youth. And as I said, the perception is that this is really not a dangerous or risky endeavor, when in point of fact we really believe it is. I've spent more than 2 decades of my life studying lung transplant physiology, and we know that this is, of all the 5 major organs that we're transplanting, heart, lung, kidney, liver, and pancreas, the lungs are open to the air. And so we know that that's part of the environment. And when we voluntarily put things deep into the lungs like this, it's a very, very dangerous situation. With regard to the phenomenon that we believe is at the root cause, which would be the lipoid pneumonia, there really is this lipoid pneumonia, there's no good treatment for it other than supportive treatment and to eliminate the reason that the oils are being emulsified and put deep inside the lungs. But it can lead to lasting problems that take not just minutes, hours, or days, but more like weeks to months or even years to recover from.
It's scary when you think about those numbers. I mean, what does that mean to the schools and law enforcement? Are we ever going to be able to get ahead of this when these numbers are out there like this?
I don't believe we're going in the wrong direction. Yeah. And that's where the awareness comes in. I think everybody needs to understand that this is a crisis. Don't assume just because you have very good kids, they're not being exposed to this, because the marketing is so strong for this that they don't believe it's an issue, and it's just a fad, and it's not a fad. It's an aggressive health risk.
What about the FDA and their role in this and getting involved? I mean, I think this is an unregulated or not as regulated as the tobacco industry, which is a big part of the problem. Getting the FDA involved to sort of, decide what happens with advertising. Is this something that we're hopeful? Do we hear anything about wheels turning in that regard?
This is absolutely a critical issue, as you've mentioned before. Unfortunately, I've sat on a number of different FDA panels. The FDA is so overwhelmed with regulating everything that's put inside the human body, taken out of the human body, and done to the human body, that they simply do not have enough personnel to regulate this technology, but it's a new technology that's just come on the scene and absolutely has to be regulated from the government standpoint.
And
I'd like to add real quick that the FDA is the appropriate champion, but I think at the local level, we have our champions really stepping up, as you can tell from the council, and then our own HHS. We're not going to wait for them to step up, but yes, the FDA would be the right champion for us all.
Dr. Grant, what about the council and what they're doing here? How big of a help is that to you guys at the schools?
It is an imperative. It's a moral imperative that we can't sit and let our children suffer without taking some preventative matters. Sorry, I'm getting choked up because I'm thinking of all 160,000 students that are there, and I'm thinking of my 4 sons at home. And it's just a moral imperative that we do whatever we can to serve students and place appropriate barriers that help them take the healthy risks. When our students are starting transitional components, having the conversations. As a parent, what are we doing to have the conversation to say, you're gonna have challenges, challenge yourself with getting your homework done every night and not being distracted with video game systems. Challenge yourself with avoiding negative peer pressure, challenge yourself with avoiding bad situations. Parents shouldn't be afraid to enter the conversation. Part of the education that we have to do as a county is to equip parents. Kids are tech savvy. Kids knew and know about the up and coming trends before we do. That's how they become a trend. Enough data comes about. So what are we doing as parents when we hear about this to then have a conversation? It is an uncomfortable conversation. And yes, your kids don't want to talk to you when they're adolescents, but we have to be able to look our children in the eyes and say, you know, do you know about juuling? Are people pressuring you to do juuling? Do you need an out? Can I help you? Do you have a trusted adult at school that you feel comfortable walking to and sharing and saying, hey, you know, this is happening. Can you help me? How do I, you know, get the appropriate support? If you're a student that is combating or you've already become addicted, do you know how to access the resources in the community? You know, if you have a friend that's vaping, are you able to say, hey, let me take you to the counselor. Let me show you where the government resources are at our local government with HHS and cessation for students, for youth. Like, what are we doing to really empower our students? And that's also part of the health education program. The pinnacle of it is that our students have the confidence and the comfort level to advocate for these types of health issues.
That was awesome. And we're about out of time, and we'd just like a couple quick takeaways from each one of the panelists. Dr. Corcoran, we'll start with you.
My concern is that the general perception, as I had mentioned before, is that this is an absolutely risk-free undertaking for our youth, and we believe that it really is not. That there are some really substantial health risks that go along with this type of activity, and we'd like to have to raise the awareness for all.
Thank you. Dr. Grant.
This is just the beginning of an education component. I think adult education is just as important as student education and community education, so we all need to do our part to make sure our neighbors, our friends are aware of what a Juul is, that it looks like a USB drive, to be able to be comfortable if you see someone at the store vaping in a public setting, to be able to call people out in a comfortable and appropriate way, of course, but making sure that our students have the appropriate information is one prong, helping them and empowering them to be health advocates to combat this is a vital component, as well as making sure parents feel comfortable and confident to have the information to be able to access resources to support our students as well.
Captain Didone.
I want to throw out a challenge to the parents, asking them what have they done to ensure that their child is not vaping and not involved in vaping. Are they searching their book bags? Are they looking into the rooms? And don't assume if they're vaping that they're not doing THC. It's your important. It's not a matter of privacy. It's your responsibility as a parent to do this research. It's uncomfortable, but it's what a parent should do, and make sure that your kids are safe. And if they're in vaping, then get them help.
Thanks to all of you, our first panel. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you to the audience in the studio and at home. I'm Susan Kennedy from Montgomery Community Media. Good night. That was great. Thank you.